Let those with two shoes sell one and buy a sword. Those with two trousers should sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is no longer on the streets. This revolution is not even on Facebook. This revolution is in the mind. Peace and power to all of you, from wherever you find yourself today, from the African Continental Unity Party. We salute you. Even though Facebook is trying to undermine us, but we have different ways to overcome all our challenges. And indeed, so my personal account is on restriction. I don't know for what reasons, but always find a plan to make things happen. Once again, peace and blessing and peace and power. So today, just want to discuss a topic, a very simple topic related to what we are facing every day in our lives as African people. And this is actually a question. The question states as capitalism or Pan-Africanism. Because as you know, every society is organized around economic activity. So everything that we do is to make sure that our nations, our society progresses economically speaking. For example, when we do politics, normally the job of politics is to defend our economic interest. When we go into education, we do that because we have to gain skills that can advance our nations economically and in other areas of our lives as well. So everything that we do in a sense of today's organized society, we do for enhancement of our economic condition, because without economy, we cannot function. A nation cannot function. In fact, all the structure that we have in a society today is built around the subject of economy. So it's very important that we understand what we deal with when it comes to economy. And there's one basic question actually that every society must ask. Every society must ask this important question, because it is the core of everything, or the way that people do everything they do on daily basis. And the question is stated like this: who controls the resources of the nation and the means of production? Right? Who must have the control of all the resources of the society and the means of production in that society? Now, there are two ways of answering this question. One way is the majority must control the means of production and the resources of the nation. Another way to answer the question is the minority must control the means of production and the resources of the nation. Now, the way you answer this question, whether you choose to have the majority controlling the resources, define the whole society as it will become with all its functionalities and all its aspects. Equally, if you decide that the majority must control the resources of the nation and the means of production, that also set up a completely different ways of function, of operations in that society, right? So as us now, African people, we are at this stage where we are supposed to rebuild Africa, because as we're speaking right now, in case you haven't realized it, Africa is in ruin and it needs us to rebuild it. And this question is a fundamental to what we have to do in the reconstruction of Africa, because mind you, Africa has been destroyed from its backbone since the colonial project, to the point where we are now. What we have now is not really Africa, but it's a broken pieces of what European civilization has managed to do for their own benefit. So if we want to re-emerge from this condition, we have but one responsibility to rebuild Africa. And by rebuilding Africa, we have this question that we need to answer. Who must control the resources of Africa, and who must control the means of production of the wealth in Africa? Will it be the majority or will it be the minority? If we say it is the minority who's supposed to control, then we go for capitalism. If we say it is the majority that must control, then we go for Pan-Africanism. So, realistically speaking, you can never be a Pan-Africanism at the same time be pro-capitalism, because these two philosophies are in opposition to one another. They cannot be brought together. You cannot be a Pan-Africanism and be pro-capitalism. It is a contradiction, unless if your Pan-Africanism is something else, it's not really a Pan-Africanism. Because when we talk about Pan-Africanism, we see collective ownership of resources. We see collaboration. We see unity. We see coming togetherness, right? This is the core philosophy of Pan-Africanism. Now, when you talk about capitalism, you see private, ownership. You see the right of individuals prevailing over the right of collective. Maybe I should repeat that again. When you talk about Pan-Africanism, we have one thing at the back of our mind, is that the rights of community must prevail over the right of individuals. It means the right of community as a whole is much important than the right of one single individual. So in other words, we have to do what we have to do to protect the whole community, to advance the whole community, rather than to advance one single person, at the cost of the whole community, right? But when you go into capitalism, it is opposite. In capitalism, the right of individual is much important than the right of the whole community. That is why it's easy for people who have capitalist mindset to destroy the whole ecosystem for a tiny number of people to have profits in the industries. As we're speaking right now, there are negotiations, for example, in the Congo, for some capitalist enterprises to go and exploit oil in the national park of Virunga, right? They are supposed to go and destroy the ecosystem, destroy the environment, and threaten the lives of animals there so that they can exploit oil. So for them, whether the environment is destroyed, it doesn't matter. Whether the whole community is destroyed, it doesn't matter. As long as this one private owner or private capitalist gets what he wants, which is the profits after or the return of his investment. That is why they are doing researches everywhere in the forests, in our communities. And when they find that something good is there, they can do whatever they can do. Even if that can be done at the cost of their whole community, it doesn't matter. As long as money is there, as long as it brings profits, that is what they care about. So in the southern side of Congo, in the region called Katanga, there was an area where it's called Funkurume. It's a small town there which had a lot of mountains there. Those mountains contains, cobalt and other minerals. But those mountains were there for centuries. Since our ancestors were there, the mountains were always there. And since the national company called Jacamine was there, which was also using, exploiting cobalt in that region, it never destroyed those mountains. It was a progressive exploitation. But in 2005, a greedy government was in power and he signed with the American company. So this company came there and got a license for, 20 years or 50 years for exploitation. But within 5 years of its operations, those big mountains were already wiped out for exploiting cobalt, exploiting all these natural resources. And if you go there, you find that that town is already disfigured. There's no more those mountains that were there. But these people, they don't know why those mountains were there. Maybe those mountains were actually regulating the wind so that things like hurricanes or these kind of strong winds that cause lots of destruction to the environment, to the towns, to the cities, to the houses, and bring more violent rains cannot come. Those mountains were there to regulate the winds, but these people came and destroyed those mountains for exploiting resources. And the people who were there living, from agriculture had to abandon their agricultural activities so that they can be hired in the mines. But after 20 years of exploitation, 10 years of exploitations, those mines were actually sold to another company, which was a Chinese company, and now it has to retrench people around 2008, somewhere around there, when there was a crisis, what we call the global crisis, economic crisis. So they had to retrench people, and these people who now had abandoned the agricultural projects to come and then work in the mines, had to find themselves jobless with the environment which was destroyed, deforestation, desertification, and all these conditions that are as a result of improper exploitation or improper dealing with the environment. They had to find themselves with no land for agricultural projects. So this is what is in the mindset of capitalism. The right of one individual is much important than the right of the whole community. That is why America is all about private rights or or individual rights over the collective rights. You see, everything is done to protect money. Look how people are armed. People are armed in protection of cash. But look what kind of protection people have in their communities compared to the protection that is assigned to the cash, to money. You see, so this can give you already a feedback. Or can you a complete picture of what the capitalist or capitalism is. Now, when we come to Pan-Africanism, which emphasizes more the right of community, the right of collective, instead of the right of one individual, the bottom line is, as an individual, you can only go as far as your community can go. If I can rephrase myself, you can become a better as much as or as far as your community is better. If you are a person who lives in a community that is poor, that is weak, that is inefficient in any way, you will be somewhere somehow evaluated according to the same proportion that your community is evaluated. So Pan-Africanism is all about collective rights over individual rights. That is why one of the principles in Pan-Africanism is, as Africa goes, so her children. Means if Africa is weak today, as it is now, every African person is being affected, is also being evaluated as a weak person, wherever you find yourself to be in the world. So for us to be valued, to have more power, to have more influence, Africa as a whole, as a global, must have the power, must have some kind of influence. So this is why Pan-Africanism is the only agenda that can serve Africa, globally speaking, from wherever we find ourselves. So now, this is just a briefly discussion of this topic, whether we choose Pan-Africanism as economic system or whether we go with capitalism as economic system. We must understand the bottom line of these two principles, and obviously by understanding that, we can know at least what we must expect in using these two or one of these two economic systems. So for us, as the African Continental Unity Party, we are pro-Pan-Africanism. We are going with the Pan-Africanism because it is the only way we can rebuild Africa, by making sure that every African person has a share of the profits produced by Africa. As I said, Pan-Africanism actually promotes the rights of collective rather than the rights of one single individual. So thank you very much. Probably next week we'll delve into the details to speak about the consequences of of capitalism, as well as the consequences of Pan-Africanism, so that we as African people we can intelligently choose what kind of economic system we must go with for our aspirations, our dreams, and our expectations to be fulfilled. Because now it is time to question everything that we have embraced. And questioning this is a process of abandoning certain things that we have, embraced for a long time from the worst, and then obviously engaging ourselves on new perspective that respond to our need in life as African people. Peace and power to you all. If you have two shoes, please sell one and buy a sword. If you have two trousers, please sell one and buy a sword, because now it is time for revolution. And this revolution is not on the streets. This revolution is in the mind, because if your mind is not freed, your body cannot be free. Thank you very much. Peace and power. Please share and like to support what we do.